Over the past few years, I've talked to hundreds of therapists in private practice, and I've asked them what actually works when it comes to marketing their private practice and getting new clients. And today I'm sharing the top 10 marketing strategies that I've learned from these conversations. Some are simple, some will take more time, but all of them have been proven to bring in more clients. Let's start with number one. Online directories. These are places where potential clients are already looking for a therapist. Psychology Today is the biggest one. It costs about $30 a month. ZocDoc is another option and they charge per client booking. Then there are also platforms like Alma and Headway that have free directories, but only if you're on their platform. And for most therapists, the math when it comes to using these services is pretty straightforward. As long as your client stays for 1 to maybe 3 sessions, they've already paid for the entire service for a year. So in almost all cases, it's worth it to have yourself listed on one of these directories. And one pro tip related to this that I've learned from talking to many therapists is to not simply just put something generic like counseling in Austin or counseling in Atlanta, but to use specific keywords like couples counseling or ADHD evaluations or trauma, specific things that actually show up in targeted searches from potential clients. Number two is local Facebook groups. These local Facebook groups are absolute gold mines when it comes to finding clients, and oftentimes people are looking for therapy in real time. You can search for local parent groups or local neighborhood groups and request to join them. One thing to note here is that every single Facebook group has their own rules, so you want to make sure you're being respectful of the community guidelines and not just go in there and start promoting your services everywhere. One way to use these pages to get clients without making it seem like you're constantly shilling your services is to use the search bar at the top and search for things like looking for a therapist or any recommendations for an anxiety counselor. Then you can jump in with a short, helpful response and just present yourself and then tell them how you can help. Number three is professional networking and referrals. Most of the therapists I talk to think about this in terms of their long-term pipeline. Build relationships with pediatricians, school counselors, OTs, PTs, really anyone who very likely shares the same client base as you. And then you can reach out to a handful of these people every month or so and then just simply say, here's who I am, here's what I'm helping with, I'm accepting new clients, just something really short and casual like that. This is a much slower strategy for sure, so you're not going to get clients immediately if you follow this, but it does work and it is very consistent. Number four is targeted niche marketing. What does that mean? It just means taking your services from offering broad general therapy to something that is a lot more focused and niche. I've seen a lot of therapists go from struggling to having a full caseload just by narrowing their focus. When you specialize, you stop competing with everybody else, and then you end up attracting only the clients that you really want. I had a therapist who told me that they focused in on clients that were Christian and that had a lot of issues with guilt. She connected with a lot of local churches, and that very quickly became her primary referral source, and she got to a full caseload really quickly. This one will take a little bit more thought than the others, but if you invest time into thinking about your niche, and then finding your focus and then just doubling down on that for your marketing efforts, then it will be worth it. Number five is therapist groups. These are Facebook groups, online forums, any group, local community, whatever, that's just full of therapists. And what you'll see when you go into these community groups is a lot of requests for very specific kinds of therapists. So you might see something like, I'm looking for someone who specializes in trauma for teens in the Chicago area, something like that. And then you can just jump in really quickly, introduce yourself, and then you basically have a client right away. And related pro tip, you can actually use this to help you figure out what your niche is. By looking at all these community social groups, you can see what kinds of therapists are most sought after, and maybe you can use that to craft whatever your niche is. You'll have to respond really quickly because most of the time these go kind of fast. But what I've heard from therapists is that in the early days, this is actually a pretty reliable way to get clients quickly. Number six is Google My Business, or I think it's just called the Google Business Profile now. But it's the profile that comes up on the right-hand side of the screen when you search for your practice on Google, or if you just search for things like therapist near me or counseling near me, something like that. It's free, and it's one of the easiest ways to show up when someone is looking for therapy immediately. Early on, you might be worried that you have no reviews, and that might look bad, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. From the therapists that I talked to, they said they got a lot of leads from there just because they were showing up on Google Maps. And it almost didn't matter that they didn't have any reviews because just the fact that they were visible was good enough. Number seven, social media presence. Now, some of you might scoff at that and think, okay, I'm not an influencer, I'm a therapist. but you don't need to post daily, dance on TikTok, or spend hours making reels on Instagram. All you really need to do is reserve your business name in the username, post a handful of photos about your services, and make sure things are up to date. Then honestly, you can forget about it until you have something interesting to post. Interestingly enough, from the therapist that I talked to, the quickest way that they've gotten a client is just through their personal connections. So when they post something on social media and they have personal connections following them, usually it turns out there's one person somewhere in their social graph that ends up needing therapy. Number 8, SEO, or search engine optimization, or website development. Okay, so this one is definitely the longest game out of the tips that I'm providing, but it also has the biggest payoff. A well-optimized website can bring in leads for many, many years, but it takes a lot of initial investment and time. This is definitely not something you should do when you're desperate for clients next week. Pick one of the other tips for that. This is something you do when you're okay investing in the long term. And in some cases, it might even make sense to hire a marketing specialist or a website specialist so that you don't have to do all of this from scratch. Number 9, Google Ads. This one's an interesting one because not a whole lot of therapists said they tried this, but the ones that did saw really, really good results. Google Ads are just the links that you see at the very top of Google when you search for something, and those are links that people have paid to have show up over there. In many ways, it's similar to search engine optimization, that is making your website rank higher on Google organically, but this shows results much faster because you're just paying Google to have your website show up at the top. I will say this usually ends up working better in smaller cities where there's less competition for the keywords. When I say keywords, those are the things that you pay Google to have your website show up at the top of the page for. So for example, if you wanted to search at the very top of the list for therapists in New York City or something like that, then you would have to pay a really large sum of money because there are lots of therapists in New York and there's a lot of competition there. But if it was a smaller town somewhere and there weren't a lot of people bidding on those same ads, then you can pay Google a fairly reasonable amount of money and have your results show up at the very, very top as soon as someone searches therapist in X, Y, and Z city. And then finally, offering to do something at workshops and educational events. So whenever you go to these, instead of just handing out business cards and doing some really lightweight networking, try to offer some value first. Maybe host a workshop or offer to give a talk on something that you know a lot about. And you'll find out that when you do this, it's a lot easier for people to connect with you. You might have people coming up to you afterwards and talking to you. People might just remember you as the person who did the talk or did the workshop. And whenever they're in need of a particular kind of specialist, they might send you a referral. Okay, so those were the top 10 marketing strategies that I gathered from talking to over 100 therapists in the last few years. One final thing to note is that some of these tips may work better for you when you're at a different stage in your practice. If you're just starting out, the ones that I'd really focus on are signing up for online directories, joining local Facebook groups, setting up your Google business profile, networking with former colleagues, and then joining local therapist groups and responding to requests for particular kinds of therapists on there. And then if you're a more established practice, you can start looking at investing in things like search engine optimization for your website, or maybe investing in some Google Ads or offering to do a workshop or a talk. So which of these tips matter for you kind of depend on the stage of the practice that you're in. And then the bottom line is basically this. There is no single strategy here that works for every single private practice. The therapists that I've talked to that are just completely booked all the time, they usually mix and match a lot of these strategies, and they know that on some years, strategy A might work better, and then on other years, strategy B might work better. So there you have it. That's 10 marketing tips to help you get new clients and grow your private practice. If you like this content, please subscribe to this channel so that you can get more content like it.